I'm Gold Derby editor Daniel Montgomery here with Bad Sisters composer Tim Phillips. Now you collaborated with PJ Harvey on this score. What did you think about getting the opportunity to work with her?
Well, I mean, it's one of those things that you sort of hope you're going to be asked to do at some point in your career, but doesn't seem to happen as often as you'd like. But yeah, it was amazing. It was, Sharon Horgan put that to me. She said, how do you feel about collaborating with Polly Harvey on this score? And I said, that sounds amazing. So yeah, I was all into it, and thankfully she was as well.
And what was the starting point for conceiving this score? Like, do you start with the script, or discussions with Sharon Horgan about what she's looking for?
Yeah, I was, and the director, Dervla Walsh. It was basically, they sent me the first couple of scripts and told me a little bit about the project and kind of what they were after, and gave it sort of general tone outline of it. And then Polly came in, and we all sort of had a chat about how we could achieve this sort of quirky potboiler sort of vibe. But we really wanted it to be very, very unique. So that's where the Polly collaboration came in. Or PJ Harvey is Polly. Yeah, it was really tapping into her voice that sort of was the sort of root of the whole production from the score point of view anyway. And then the rest of the instrumentation was built around her voice in order to sort of complement it,
And you've recorded her voice, I understand, as sort of an instrument almost to kind of use throughout the score. How long
Yeah.
was that recording process to kind of get so much like audio material from her?
It was a couple of days, but it was full on, like 15 hours or something. Really boring for her, I'm sure, because she had to sit in a booth singing one semitone after another on 6 or 8 different syllables that we'd mapped out for her to do. I mean, because we had very limited time together, I had to be very specific about what I needed and just basically go in and grab everything. And yeah, I remember going into that thinking she's not going to put up with this for very long, but actually she was fantastic because um, she's very interested in a more experimental process. I think if we'd just gone in and said, can we get you to sing some musical lines that are pre-written, she probably would have left, because it's not as interesting as doing something that's at least I've never tried to do before. So
By the time you had all that material, did there end up being anything you wish you had that you hadn't recorded, or any kind of quality of tone,
yes.
or
Yeah, lots, and we're going to get it this time for season 2. And as well as just kind of moving the score forward. We were speaking about that recently, actually. The way that the score needs to evolve along with the new scripts is going to be quite interesting. But yeah, definitely I'm going to get my bucket list PJ Harvey vocalizations in the bag this time.
and did you feel any pressure being entrusted with her voice, in that way to kind of use as you saw fit?
Yeah, my technique was to ignore it because um you need to get to a place where you're confident with what you've made, and then send it back in that sort of form, and with a knowledge that it's good. So I did sort of keep it to myself for a little while as I was putting stuff together, and then sent a lot of stuff that I really felt was working over to Polly and to production and everyone. And thankfully everyone came back really excited about it. Because when you're especially starting off a new show, and I always try and do something bold, and everyone says they want something bold, but often that's not really the case. They really just want to not notice it very much a lot of the time with score. And this is not a score it's easy to ignore, I don't think. So thankfully everyone was really energized by that result rather than frightened of it.
And over the course of collaborating with them, did Sharon Horgan and Dearbhla Walsh have very specific ideas of what they wanted, or did you have a lot of free reign to explore?
No, we had a lot of free reign to put it together. They knew that, I mean, I've worked with Dervla Walsh quite a few times and Sharon before as well, and so we have a sort of a trust relationship, I think, where they were they were just excited to hear what was going to come out of the blender, really. And yeah, I mean, I was very excited to hear the stuff as it was coming together, because when we recorded all of the poly vocalization stuff at the very start, before any score had been written at all, so we were sort of putting together this library of music for a show that nobody had seen, based on one script that we'd read, and not really knowing what kind of music it needed to be yet. So it was very, very cool to see it coming together and actually fitting into the flavor of what was coming out of the cutting room. So yeah, it was a real thrill, actually, putting the score together. So.
And how did working with PJ Harvey's voice influence sort of your musical style? Did it change the way you approach composition?
Definitely, because we had stuff, some of the stuff was in certain timings and certain keys that were comfortable for her to sing in. It wouldn't necessarily be the key that I would go to first, or, stuff like that. Yeah, it was absolutely a case of adapting my natural path through the forest to the one that, we sort of plowed together. Yeah, it was a very sort of surreal experience it was almost like reverse engineering a score from stuff that's pre-existing, like we found a time capsule full of musical samples and fragments and just had to make it into something. What was really surprising to me was that a very high number of the stuff, or a high percentage of the sample that we got, which was a lot of material, did end up in the show. And that wouldn't, I mean, I would not have guessed that when we went in on hour one to start recording. I thought, if a few of these things work, that'll be amazing. But most of it did. So yeah.
And the show balances, these tones: comedy, drama, mystery, suspense. Was that something that was challenging to capture, all these kinds of different varying moods in like one cohesive score?
It was, and yeah, and I definitely wanted it to be not at the type of score that feels kind of I wanted it to feel like organic to the show. So it not like millions and millions of different sounds, but just a few very specific, almost like like a kind of a folk band, with a very strange singer and some very quite eclectic instruments. So I wanted it to come from a small family of instruments to sort of reflect the small family of the story, or medium-sized family of the story. Yeah, so it was definitely a thrill ride putting this stuff together, and they I didn't actually know what was coming up ahead as I was scoring earlier episodes. It was I don't think purposefully kept from me, but I purposefully didn't ask, because with this show, because of the way it was developing, I thought, oh, it's probably better if I'm as surprised as the people, or nearly as surprised as the people watching it. So I didn't know when he went down to the cellar, or Becca goes down to the cellar to find the dead body in the freezer, for example. Like, I had no idea that was coming up, and it just, the editors and the direction was so good on the show as well. They kind of built it up in a way that the way to score it seemed pretty clear. So my job was more to keep the sonic palette developing and interesting.
And you mentioned having this small family of instruments. It's sort of like the family of Garvey sisters. Did you associate any particular instruments with particular sisters, or have like particular musical motifs that you associated with the different sisters?
Not with the sisters, but definitely with JP, the lead antagonist, the prick. I definitely had a little. There's a recurring motif throughout the whole series that's definitely him. It's called the Pricks theme, and it's played on banjo quite a lot, which is an instrument I wanted to get on a score for about 10 years or something. I've been pitching banjos to people, and no one's ever let me use one. So this was, I don't know, it was the tone of this show, just it sat really well within it. And it's that kind of charming, slightly smug, slightly irritating sound that just seemed to really fit with him. Yeah, so I don't know if it's going to be there in series 2. Probably not.
What about the banjo has interested you over time?
It's just a challenge. I mean, whenever I start a new project, I like to have things I haven't like think challenges for myself. Like I always include new instruments that I've or new synthesizers I haven't played around with, new instruments I don't really know how to use, because I just find it sort of activates a problem solving gear in my mind that makes me come up with stuff. Just keeps me creative. If I use the same set of instruments all the time, I get bored really quickly. So it's always good to have something I might not even know how to play very well, but can find a way to function within the score. I find that really stimulating, and that was the logic behind using the banjo.
And you try and challenge yourself with every different project. But is there a particular personal style you would say that kind of unites your different scores, or are they all really different depending on the show or the movie, or
Yeah, it does depend on the show. You can find, if you looked closely, you can find some similarities for sure. We all have our, I think, go-to kind of things that we if you're scoring an emotional scene or something, there's probably 3 or 4 kind of gears that I would have that are quite easy for me to roll out. But I'm always suspicious of becoming a cliche of myself, so I always try and crack the Rubik's Cube in a new way. Partly because it makes the work. This job involves like very long hours of sitting, watching something over and over and over, and playing with the same themes over and over if you're on a series. And I've just discovered I need to keep finding ways to keep myself making discoveries as I go, because it just makes the score come out better for me. So I think different people have their own ways of skinning the cat, but that's definitely mine.
Now the series takes place in Ireland. Is that a milieu you've composed for before, or was that new?
No, I lived in London in England for almost 2 decades. So I know that, and I've been to Ireland a lot, and I have many Irish friends and all that sort of thing, but I'm not Irish. My mother's Scottish, if that gives me any sort of qualification. Probably doesn't. But no, it wasn't. I mean, that was very much something I didn't want to try and do. It was like do Irish music, because it's not really in my wheelhouse, for one thing. And for another, it just felt like I didn't want it to end up feeling like a tourism video. So, and also somebody who does that for a living would probably do it much better and more quickly than I could. My thing is really world building to a specific atmosphere on a production. So I took my approach to the Irish thing was to treat it as a family of instruments and treat it more like just a very specific tone with folk kind of ingredients in it. So actually, there's another logic to having the banjo. It's kind of a folky kind of instrument. There's a lot of hand percussion and just stuff like, I've been in those jam sessions in Irish pubs where everyone's just picking up an instrument and shaking it, and it was very much that kind of thing. It was like a kind of a ragtag band of people playing whatever's in the room. So that was my approach.
And how long would you say it took to compose the score overall for season 1?
I was on it from December to end of July. So So 8 months. It was a long series. It was 10 hours, I think. So it wasn't, it wasn't every day, but I think it was pretty, yeah, I mean, it was pretty solid work for that period. Yeah, I wouldn't be able to tally the hours for you, but it's probably quite a lot.
Well, I want to congratulate you on those hours spent. Well spent, I think. Congratulations on season one. Looking forward to hearing what you have in store for season two. Thank you so much for talking with me about it today.
Yeah, no, thanks, pleasure.